Hey, I'm Morgan, and this is the PS We Expire podcast.
In our family, we've been talking a lot about how it can be easy to respond to life instead of trying to figure out what feels most important in terms of values, or maybe it's principles or how we spend our time, and then choosing to have the courage to orient our life to that. So in our case, it meant a career change that came with a lot of risk, and for the purpose of a larger value, which was both my husband and I being able to spend more time together, to take an entrepreneurial risk together, to experience our partnership in a new, a different way. I think that can apply broadly. What is it that we need to pay attention to? How can we orient our time and energy and resources to that?
I know that you've been a therapist for a long time, and so I want to talk just for a second about what you just said about how we live our lives in reaction or response to our environments instead of intentionally. Can you just talk more about that? Like, what are some of the things maybe that you saw with your patients or your clients, and something that you like, a pattern that you see perpetuated even with things that people share on social media or in your own life in regards to that kind of always living in response mode?
Yeah, it's interesting that you say that, because if I could summarize the times when I often see a client for the first time, are often those times when living as they had been, kind of in response to life, which we all do at times, no longer is tolerable. Meaning there's like a pain, a discomfort, anxiety, depression, a catalytic event, a loss, but something makes it intolerable to keep kind of responding or living as we had been, having those same maybe coping strategies or relational patterns, and something's disruptive. And as painful as those moments can be, I think as a therapist, I'm able to hold some hope, because I recognize that often that is the moment when people are able to begin noticing some of that, and perhaps choosing and having more autonomy to live in a different direction with more intention, based on maybe new values or maybe new relational patterns. But it's almost this kind of autonomy, like taking the reins back and saying, actually, I think this is what I value, or this wasn't working. I didn't even almost know it wasn't working.
Mm. Yeah, I suspect that that is true for a lot of people, where like, and I've been curious about this very thing. Like, is it that people change and so then the old becomes intolerable, or do you think it's that we just didn't recognize that it was kind of intolerable all along, because we've been trained to live from the neck up and always do like an intellectual evaluation of our circumstances instead of living like really embodied lives?
Yes, I think that's a really beautiful question. I think there are times different practitioners will conceptualize the problem in a different way. My view is that it's less so that a person has all of a sudden changed, but more so it's a revealing of who they've always been. And it's I view healing as becoming more and more ourselves and embodied in who we always have been, but maybe weren't able to live fully into.
What are some of the reasons why people don't feel like they can live a fully embodied life, or that they can completely be themselves? Like, what are some of the maybe like top three reasons? Put you on the spot. Top three reasons that people in therapy are saying like, well, I can't do that. I can't disrupt my life. I can't change things. I can't do something differently.
I think a lot of us learn early on what is going to earn us love, belonging, acceptance, or what behaviors threaten love, belonging, and acceptance, and thus create, unbeknownst to ourselves, patterns of being that are a bit protective, or maybe aren't always a full expression of our authenticity, because the environment around us, we feel, necessitates it, and we're not willing to risk, and probably shouldn't in some of our earlier years, disruption
Hmm.
of primary relationships. So for me, this looked like being really good and learning to be really good and follow the rules and be a high achiever. And I received accolades, um, But as I've gotten older, and really it took into my 40s for me to learn in sort of a painful way that I actually um, have a truth in me that sometimes I have a power and a fire that sometimes ruffles feathers, for example. And that side of me I pushed down, or any part of me that I deemed not perfect or polished. So you asked a good question about the top three. The first response that comes to mind is the number one, um, that risk of not belonging. I'll have to think. I'll answer. I'll try to think of the other two things, but I think that sometimes is primary, a sense of belonging and acceptance.
That makes perfect sense that, even if we recognize something in ourselves that maybe we've tamped down for a long time, like I like that you said that there's this part of you that's like a fire. And I
Mm-hmm.
imagine like trying to stuff that down is just, it's like, it's just smoldering in there. And like, how could it not create internal
Yeah.
friction if there's this heat in there that's being stifled?
Can I?
That I,
Oh, sorry. Keep going.
please, no, go
But I
ahead.
was thinking, Morgan, I'm a trained therapist, and I had been for 15 years before I even knew this. And you know what it took?
Mm,
Chest pain. I remember I started having like tension in my chest. I wasn't able to breathe deeply. And that is what ended up leading me on a course to even understanding this. So um, I just wanted to grant myself empathy and anyone empathy these are hard things to see sometimes. Yeah.
I remember a friend telling me before that sometimes we need someone else to help us break the spell.
Mhm.
And I really love that phrasing because it really does feel like we kind of walk through life in this haze, and we can't sometimes tell what is real and what isn't, or what needs to be expressed and what doesn't. And it takes someone on the other side of that sometimes to just like pop the bubble for us and be like, nope, like this was an illusion, or this, this is a story that you've lived with for a long time, but it's not true. And so like having someone in the therapist role for sure definitely helps with this quite a bit. It also could just be a friend that is a really good listener who cares about us a lot. But this is a great way for us to start talking about the Pearl Project, because on your site, where people can purchase these kits, you talk about the gaps in mental and emotional support. Like if someone either doesn't have access to traditional therapy
Mhm.
because it is sometimes can be so expensive, and insurance
Mhm.
companies are jerks about it and they don't want to pay for mental health services. And I know that on the back end of it, therapists also are getting the short end of the stick
Mhm.
if you have to bill insurance and things like that. So and then also, if someone can't afford it, it still often is once a week or once every 2 weeks. And so what do you do in the in between when you don't have that robust support? And so I love what you're talking about and what you're doing with the Pearl Project to be able to supplement some of these services that people need for their mental health. I would love to hear the origin story of this, of the Pearl Project, and then if you could talk about the kits that you're doing and why you chose those ones, and talk about I mean, I could nerd out on the science behind the things that you're doing with these, but I would love for you just to tell us all the things about the Pearl Project. If you followed my work for any amount of time, you know how much I love mindfulness-based tools that are backed by science. I've created a lot of things over the years having to do with mindfulness, meditation, just habit development. I've never really had a place to house them all in a way that is easily accessible. Well, I created a resource vault a few weeks ago, and I wanted to give you access to all the things that I've created. So in this resource vault, there's guided meditations, a meditation course, a list of 55 books that will change how you think, journal prompts. In this vault are things about entrepreneurship, like how to create a podcast, how to start a business. All of these things are in my resource vault, and they are free. If you go to morganmatzinger.com/vault, you will get access. Okay, back to the show.
It started because I was in session with clients and I found myself wishing I could send home something tangible, because there would be this powerful work that I noticed, by the way, was thematic. Despite the presenting problem, often there were these underlying themes of around belonging and having courage to do hard things and hard conversations and grief and loss. And I thought, what if I could package up something tangible that was science based and professional and rooted in principles that have been researched, and pair it with a metaphor, a question, a story, a tangible object that so people could use their systems of support, be it a partner or a sibling, friend, to be able to practice some of what has been learned, but in a very hands on way, because the neuroscience supports being able to touch, taste, smell, see, integrate, not just in a cognitive speaking way, but in an embodied hands on way. So the kits are multisensory, and they're made with love because um, I've been sitting across so many people and I want to just be like, here's a care package, but from your therapist.
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's really lovely. What kits do you have available already? And you just mentioned like four different things. I don't know if I wrote these down quickly enough, but metaphor, story, a question, and an item. Did I get that right?
Mm-hmm.
So why did you choose those four things, and what kits or boxes do you have available right now?
Yeah. I chose those because I find that for myself, I remember something most when it is linked to or attached to a story or metaphor. I think about speakers I've heard in the past or things I've read, and those are the things that tend to stand out to me. So I thought, what if we could hang mental health concepts on that? So, for example, the first kit that's available is called Facing the Storm, and it's about the ways in which we tend to run from hard things that we would rather not face. I think we all have those. And the story I tell is one I heard growing up in Colorado. I grew up in Colorado, and these big storms roll in the summer, and clouds fill up with, clouds are in the skies. And I grew up kind of near the mountains where there's these flat plains. And what happens is the horses and the cows, when these storms roll in, they run away from the storm. They want to try to flee that oncoming threat. And there's also a lot of bison that roam in these areas. And what's interesting is, like, almost intuitively, these bison turn towards the storm and they face it head on. And as a result, they end up passing through the storm faster because the storm passes over them, where the cows and the horses, it nips at their tails. And so we commissioned an art piece, and it's called Facing the Storm, and it's a bison and shows these clouds. And the kit is about the science of how we do hard things and why we do hard things. And yeah, it's paired with a question deck and a few other things. But that's an example of what I'm trying to do.
What is the science behind that?
So we talk about how we are wired as humans for self-preservation. It's built into our very nervous system, and we can't easily decipher between a physical threat and an emotional threat. So when we feel scared, activated in our nervous system, worried, disappointed, grief, we naturally, in our very core, want to run from that. We want to avoid it. And so, thus, often we choose coping strategies, let's say to feel better. Netflix, alcohol. I mean, just name the things that we can sort of love to, because we don't want to be in it. But what's unfortunate is sometimes those create a dopamine surge, which then creates some neurocircuitry, and that makes it challenging to do the hard work of being the bison. So we find ourselves in that position of the cow or the horses. We desperately want to feel better. Who doesn't?
Hmm.
But my belief is that the way we get there is by embodying the spirit of the bison.
I don't like that.
I don't either.
Yeah, I know it's true. I know it's true, but the idea of turning and looking at the big scary thing and telling the truth about how big and gnarly and nasty and terrifying it is,
Mm-hmm.
and standing your ground anyway is, and I even think like moving towards it also means that it would be faster. You would be in it less time. And I think one of the fears that many people have when they think about doing anything like inner child work, or looking at the shadow work, or digging into childhood trauma, or things like that, or even something that doesn't have to be quite so in depth, but maybe it's something like, I'm having a really hard time in this parenting thing with my child, and I see myself reacting in ways that I don't want to react.
Mm-hmm.
So how do I address that? It's like, um, we forget that if we face those things and feel those things, that we're not going to feel those things forever. Like, that's a big fear, I think, for a lot of
Yes.
people. It's like, if I allow myself to be as angry as I am, or as sad as I am, or as scared as I am,
Mm-hmm.
then I'm never going to be able to turn the faucet off. Like, that will become my new MO. I will just be like this forever. So could you talk a little bit about what we know from neuroscience, from embodied work, about emotions, about especially like ones that feel really terrible to move
Yeah.
towards?
I'm so glad you brought that up, Morgan, because I do think the first step is naming the fear and allowing space and room for what you just said. Full stop, like right there. Yes, it feels terrible. It feels like not only will I always be in this bad place, but I'm going to be overwhelmed by it. I'm going to be unable to do the things that I need to do to keep my life going. And I think that's it's worth just naming that. And maybe because I have seen so many clients over the years, and myself included, do this courageous work, I have seen that often, almost always, it actually has the opposite effect. It um, it can often be a release to be in it that lessens the heaviness, at least in the short term. And then you do it again, and then you do it again, and then you learn that you can do it. Um,
Hmm.
that being said, I really honor everyone's autonomy, and I do think there are times in which we do need to listen and know the right time and space to enter that hard. Um, so it's a bit of a nuanced personal journey too.
That's so helpful to hear someone who has the professional experience that you do say that, because it feels like when we spend time online, everybody's kind of like peddling their magic pill that everybody should take. It's
Mm.
like, this is prescriptive and everybody should do it this way. And so whenever someone who like really knows their stuff is like, hey, guess what? This is actually really varied across populations. This is really varied across like what season of life you're in. Like, how much space do you have in your life right now to really explore some of these things? And so sometimes, people can, I speak for myself. It's like, sometimes I feel like, well, I can't do the band-aid fix because maybe I'm just gonna, like, I'm not really doing the work, instead of recognizing that, hey, like right now I'm at capacity for this, and it maybe isn't the best time to like deal into issues with my dad,
That's so important. In fact, also considering the support that's in place is really important too. You mentioned bandwidth, which is a key part of it, but what kind of support is there, for that harder work? Because it's so important to be in community, I think, and have people with you.
Can I ask, from like a really, I would say, personal and professional perspective, when someone is shopping for a therapist,
Mm.
what are some things that we should be on the lookout for? And also, what are some things that maybe people typically think are taboo or wrong, about choosing a therapist, that we can just dispel some of the fears? I'll share one of mine right off the bat, is that not every therapist is going to be a good fit, even
Mhm.
if they are great people and they are warm and welcoming and they know their stuff. Sometimes they're not going to be a good fit. And like, it almost is like this automatic loyalty,
Yeah.
where same thing with, someone who's cut your hair for a long time, and maybe they're not actually very good at it, but you've been going to them for so long that you feel awkward or bad about breaking up with them. So like, we talk about some of the taboos in therapy and how to maybe spot someone who's a good fit for you.
Yeah. Gosh, I wish I had a secret sauce on it. I will speak to some things that come to mind. And the first is exactly what you mentioned. I think it's so important to have a good uh, feeling of rapport. I'll say that.
Mm.
A comfortability, yeah, if that's not there, I would say, like, I don't know, I'd say break up with them. I would.
You heard it here, friends.
Yes,
Jen said that you can break up
I
with
would
your
say,
therapist if
I
you don't
would
jive with
say
them.
that. I would say that. I think, to me, okay, let me tell you. I remember when I was in grad school, they for some reason this stands out to me that this professor put up a pie graph, and it was a graph. It was a a pie chart thing of, and it was like, what do clients report being most helpful in a therapeutic relationship? And it was like clinical knowledge, uh, theoretical orientation, wise intervention, all of it, whatever. Bottom line, like something like 82% of the value add in a therapeutic relationship is the rapport and connection with the person
Mm.
sitting in front of you. So they may be as wise, as educated, as knowledgeable, have these really thoughtful questions. But if you don't feel as if your whole self, good, bad, ugly, can be on the table, mm-mm. Um, and then I guess there's some practical considerations which feel far less important, but still are worth mentioning. Does that person, are they able to hold your cultural, all of the things that make you you? Um, is there enough knowledge or expertise in your presenting problem? So, for example, if you're coming in for treatment for an eating disorder, does that person have some specialized training? Are they
Mm.
familiar with your culture, your language, your history? Do they meet your price point? Um, so some of those are important. Does their schedule work with yours? Some of those obvious ones, but the relationship.
It's interesting to me too that we often don't know why we don't jive with someone.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and this has been my experience, not just in therapy, but just in life in general, where I will bypass what my body is saying because I have been trained to listen more to the intellectual evaluation of the situation or of the person. And it's put me in some, not terribly healthy relationships, friendships, because I've ignored, it's like this looks really good on paper, so it must be good regardless of how I feel. And it's been really interesting to take classes on bias. I'm taking a psychology class right now on sports and gender in not sports and gender, race and gender in
Yeah.
sports. And even the things that we're learning in that class, of course, there's like cross application to all different areas of life, but talking about the implicit biases that we carry. What's the difference between discrimination and prejudice? What are some of the hardwired knee-jerk reactions that we have to things? And it can be as simple as, we had to do these tests. I don't know why I'm going on and
Oh,
on about this, but
please,
I think it's really interesting
please.
and maybe helpful for people to hear a little bit about how our brains work. But we had to do these tests, which I think are available to anybody to take, where you essentially see like a word and a picture, and you're supposed to, they're like good words and bad words. So the good words would be delicious or
Mm,
calming or peaceful, and the bad words would be aggressive, disgusting, vomit, whatever,
yeah.
and so they've categorized these words, and then you see pictures flash with the words, and you're supposed to, as quickly as possible, put the picture with the word based on how they're telling you to do it. So it's a really simple test, but depending on how quickly you are able to categorize the picture with the word, if it naturally goes with something that you associate whatever that looks like with that word. So there's a really interesting one that has to do with like body image.
Mm,
So fat versus thin, and how quickly you associate thinness with goodness.
mm,
It helps just illuminate these places where we didn't really know how quickly we make judgments about these things. So, in going back to what I was asking about, like a therapist, sometimes you don't know why you don't jive with someone, and it's okay to not do that, but it's also a really interesting avenue of self-exploration to be like, why do I have this response to this person or to this situation? And so much of our lives we operate on these subconscious beliefs or subconscious stories or these like neural networks that have been laid down in childhood. And then exactly to what we were talking about at the very beginning, it's like we kind of hit a point in our life where we're like, hold on a second, like what exactly has contributed to me thinking about this population in this way, or thinking about my body in this way, or thinking about all these things in these different ways? Like, hold on a second. And sometimes it takes that, snow globe shake of a life event for us to start asking these questions.
Yes, you're so right. That's really interesting. As you were describing that study, it's like what a way to somehow, if you're able to kind of tap into the unconscious before you even have a second to filter, like it's a really interesting glimpse into those just knee jerk biases. Yeah, how fascinating.
Yeah. It's hard not to be like, oh, I'm a terrible piece of crap, because I immediately thought this. But that's, and maybe that is a great way to understand too, any of the self-work that we do, shame will block us every time from actually looking at it.
Yes. Yes. And maybe that's where the relationship piece is so important too, because shame often um, is grown in relational contexts, and so it would make sense that the undoing of shame is best worked out in relational contexts as well. Um, I mentioned earlier in the conversation my fear about growing up and having to be perfect, and this fear of the fire in
Mm.
me and how that might impact relationships. And I remember early on in my healing, I was like, huh, what if I tried, like, what if I said what I really felt or spoke up about some of these things? And as in our field, we call it a corrective emotional experience, but um, shame almost became healed as I realized people still want to be around me, like me, respect me, um, with that fire as a part of my essence. Um, so,
So like the if I'm understanding this correctly, the corrective emotional experience would be in the moment when you feel like doing the thing that you've always done. If you do something differently that is more aligned with who you really are, and you get some type of positive feedback from that, whether it's from yourself or from outside of yourself, that helps to start rewire some of
yeah.
those.
And that's why the relationship in therapy is so important, because people often will first trust those micro movements in the context of a safe professional setting. And then
Hmm.
sometimes those can be generalized um, outside of that. But yes, the rewiring of the neural circuitry and the trusting self to be fully embodied and operate in a different way in the world is a slow, hard work, but often in the context of relationship is how we see it working out.
That's really hard for a highly individualistic society to hear. that that hurt happens in relationship and healing happens in relationship. There's like a very a big messaging of like the healing work is the work I do by myself, alone in my house with my journal or
And
whatever.
then I will present to myself this preferred
Yes.
version once I'm able to kind of zip up and figure out, and then I will come reemerged, having done this healing. Yeah.
I will be in the cocoon turning to goo all alone.
Mhm.
And then emerges beautiful complete butterfly.
Yeah.
It's all fixed now.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mm. So the Pearl project, I took us on a big tangent, but we were talking about the metaphors, the stories, the questions, and the item that fits in the box.
Mhm.
And you were talking about the your first box that you have, which is facing the storm. What's the other box that you have available right now?
The next one is called Diving for Pearls, and we explore the metaphor of how pearls are formed in deep, deep, on ocean floors in the most unlikely of places, in the most unlikely of ways, where an irritant enters, and then layer by layer by layer, this precious gem is formed. So, kit number 2 is about becoming a scientist of your emotions. It's about starting to gain insight around kind of what we were talking about, patterns, natural responses, what's working and what's not. So, I guide us through the process of becoming very familiar with our own interior landscape and recognizing ways in which those disruptions, those challenges have shaped us and continue to shape us. And it's really an exploratory kit that is, yeah, it's one of my favorites. And so the item is a hand painted oyster shell, and they're all unique. They're all from the bottom of the ocean. And so they have a pearlescent inside, a gold exterior, and that comes with a satchel of pearls. And the
Are they real
No,
pearls?
which by the way, I can tell you, I went to a pearl tour. Like I got to learn about how pearls are formed off the coast of Mexico one time, but that's for a different podcast. But real pearls are extremely rare these days. They're often, but now they're farmed. So they actually have an irritant that they put inside of a net, and they descend it into the ocean. It's fascinating. And then they farm by creating a sort of a environment for the pearls to grow, but they're not then okay. Naturally occurring pearls are like one in every 10,000 mollusks or shells or
Whoa.
something, but those are special. Anyway, and then the satchel of pearls is every time during the course of this learning, there's an aha moment or a new way of doing things, or you get to take a pearl out and put it in the shell as a tangible reminder of the discovery and the process of forming pearls.
That's beautiful. What? Okay, so you just a second ago and not to like totally give away what's in the kit, but you said that you walk people through the process of understanding like becoming an emotional scientist. Can you say more about that?
Yeah. So we talked about the nervous system earlier, and we talked about how we can become activated, and it's so uncomfortable that we want to try to run. And so we explore, fight, flight, fawn, freeze, some different responses to activation. And then we get really specific in understanding patterns. So when do we feel those in our life? Can we get curious about why we may feel that? Almost like a scientist would have a pen and paper, like a field note, take field notes. So after facing the storm, we're in the storm, and then we're going to really understand all that's coming up for us. So we talk about different aspects of how our brain is wired and how that impacts why we do what we do, and then some really specific questions to help clarify some of that for us.
There's a word that's pretty popular in like the pop psychology zeitgeist, which is trigger.
Mm-hmm.
And do you mind just explaining the difference between maybe how some people are using the word trigger to just be like, oh, this person annoyed me and now I'm annoyed and that was a trigger versus how trigger would be used in like a therapeutic context?
I think, yeah, trigger in its fullest form, or in maybe the therapeutic world, would mean an event or a smell, a sensation that activates a familiar, it doesn't have to be familiar, I guess, but a nervous system response that gives a specific and unique clue to a wiring that has been built for a long, long time. And so it's usually a bit nuanced and specific to perhaps a specific injury point, loss. So, yes, you can be annoyed by someone and that can trigger you. I think a more accurate word would be just annoyed or bothered. Triggered is like maybe a window into an emotional hurt. And do we understand and know what that is? Would it help us to give language to it, to be empathetic, to be kind and caring as we learn about and talk about the hurt?
What might a trigger that activates the fight, flight, freeze, or fawn feel like in someone's body?
Mm. I guess I could give a personal example since I've been weaving through this story of feeling like I had to be such a good girl. So, okay, I this is terrible. I mean, this feels like a very silly example, but I experienced, I one time got pulled over for speeding. Okay. And it is silly. I got pulled over, but I am in trouble. I have broken a rule. And maybe all of us feel this, but for me, anytime I perceive a disappointment, a failure, a shortcoming, I have, big or small, the police thing is a small one. My husband's mad at me, or I upset him, whatever. I mean, okay, for me, it's different for everyone. Pounding heart, um, sweating, kind of like truly, truly physiological changes. And I'm sure we could all point to our own. Mine is also always a tight chest.
Yeah.
So, as I said, I'm newer to this understanding, but I can often then now point to my body gives me important clues to help understand the injury point and help me heal the injury point.
Does healing the injury point happen with a like an evaluation of a prior event, or is it happening in the moment? I guess what I'm wondering is, people who are saying I can recognize now that I get triggered by these things, but I don't know what to do about it. Like, good for me that I notice it now and I don't just continue in this response to this thing. But what does somebody do about that once they recognize it?
I think there's multiple things to do. We can practice taking care of our physical body and soothing our physical body in the moment. We can gain understanding, and so we utilize our mind, our cognition to help understand in a greater context why the reaction in this moment feels bigger than it might for others in this moment. We can choose different behaviors moving forward than we would historically. So instead of, for example, numbing, we can actually sit with it for a little longer and sort of choose a different forward moving action. Often it's really powerful to go back. One strategy for doing that is taking a version of adult self and bringing it
Hmm.
back. A lot of people who have been in therapy might be familiar with this approach, which is soothing through our mind's eye and through some different strategies our younger hurt self with an adult self that has a strength, a bolstering, a developed frontal lobe, all the things in place to be able to offer and lend to a younger hurt self. And sometimes that can alleviate the amount of times you're triggered. It can provide some healing for those triggering moments. Not always, but sometimes.
That's so helpful. I too am uh, definitely get caught up in the I'm in trouble.
Mm-hmm.
If someone's disappointed in me, like the bad news bears, like this is a big deal.
Mm-hmm.
And I have found so much comfort in addressing child Morgan, who getting in trouble really was a big deal because it threatened, like you said at the very beginning, it threatened my belonging. I mean, probably not really, but that's how children perceive that, is like, if I don't shape up, like, I'm out of here. Who am I going to be able to rely on? Where am I going to be safe? And so I will swallow anything that might make me get in trouble
Mm-hmm.
or disappoint someone. I'm gonna any of those things that happen to tip that off at some point in my childhood. I'm gonna make sure I don't do that as an adult. And then here comes adult Morgan coming in and being like, actually, like, we're grown up now. It's okay if somebody's upset at us. It's okay if we have made a mistake. Like, we're an adult and we know how to navigate that now.
Mm-hmm.
My well-being and safety, in a really practical sense of like food and shelter, are not threatened by someone being upset at me. And I'm really curious about, in the moment, you gave the example of being pulled over. So in the moment when you are feeling the tight chest, the heart racing, the sweaties, like, what do you do in that moment to really take care of yourself? Or do you just recognize it and allow yourself to feel it? Like,
Yeah.
what does that
Yeah.
look like really practically?
Yeah. I have found it helpful to remember some truths that I'm anchoring to, and they come to me in forms of mantra. Um, things that I just know that I'm working on still embodying, but take time. So I am, I am good. Everyone makes mistakes. These sort of basic, again, the things that I wish I could have told little kid Jen, like you are, you
Hmm.
are loved and lovable. Mistakes um, don't jeopardize that core basic truth. Um, and so it's sometimes in the police car. I mean, it would be probably just reminding myself of those truths. Also, I have some breathing strategies that I use now that help with the tight chest. I didn't know them before, but some very practical, like a breathing strategy that helps calm my nervous system. And then again, the mind, like I'm, I'm good. Like I'm okay. I am a good person.
What is the breathing strategy, if you don't
Yeah.
mind sharing that?
I just utilize a very basic box breathing strategy. So it's 4 seconds of breathing in, and then you hold for 2, and you exhale for 8. And I have learned it's very hard to have an activated nervous system, at least in the moment while I'm utilizing that breathing, because it elongates the exhale and just slows and calms the body in my experience. And so, yeah.
That's one of the things that I feel like we often miss is like we jump to trying to reason our way out of whatever we're feeling instead of learning how to tolerate just feeling what we're
Yeah.
feeling, you know. And it's I've often thought about this, like with when my kids were little and they would be pissed about having to put their socks on or something, you know, like that. It would not have worked for me to be like, now, Luke, you need to put your socks on because it's cold outside and I don't want your toes to get cold or whatever.
Yeah.
Like, it is offline. Like, his ability to have like a conversation with me in, in
Yeah.
a very cognitive appraisal of what's happening. That's offline.
Yeah.
Right now, it's just the bad feelings. And we like to think that as adults we're not, we're much too mature for that now, and it's so not true. Like, our nervous system often responds still in the same ways. We've just learned to hide it better. Like, we
Yeah.
have a better poker face now.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so, like, we need to attend to our poor little temper tantrum toddler before we could try and reason our way out of whatever we're feeling.
Yeah. Like when I signed on here to do this podcast, I admitted to you I've not done a lot of these, and I'm feeling nervous. And what did you do? You weren't like,
Mm.
"Oh, don't be nervous." Like, it was like, you're just so kind to me. Like, let's hear more about it. Let's make some space for that. I don't know. We're
Mm.
humans here trying to navigate this world, and it's beautiful when there are contexts and friendships and relationships where the fullness of our selves and all, even when we don't, the pleasant, the unpleasant, all of it. Gosh, what if that was all welcome? What a breath of fresh air if we didn't feel like we had to hide parts of ourselves. That would be beautiful.
That would be the best.
Yeah.
Is it worth not hiding ourselves, um even if like other people don't like it?
Mm, I have an answer. I want to hear yours. Am I allowed to ask you questions? Okay, I
Sure.
want to hear your answer first. Say it one more time. Say the
Well,
question one more time.
I was asking if it's worth it to reveal your true self, even if other people don't like it.
Mm,
And my answer is yes and no, because it's depending on the people closest to us, like what is their track record of responding with curiosity and kindness when we do reveal parts of ourselves. So, like, to me, excuse me, it depends on this, this almost like a target,
yeah.
where at the center of it you have yourself, and then the first inner layer or inner ring is the people who have the most say and most input into your life on a regular basis. And then from there out, it goes to acquaintances, whatever.
Yeah.
And I'm like very comfortable with being myself to the people on the like outermost ring. Who cares? Like, if Janet in Ohio is like, I don't like your hair, like, I don't care. That's fine. Or I don't like your political opinions. Like, okay, whatever. But the further in we go, the more quote unquote risky it is. So it feels like, and maybe I don't know if this is healthy or not, but it feels like sometimes I have to be strategic about where and when I reveal parts of myself, because there is, there, in a lot of ways, there, as much as I can say I'm an adult now, and so really practically it doesn't matter if my belonging is at risk, like that's not really
Yeah.
true, because there are real consequences to revealing certain parts of ourselves to the people in that inner ring. So yes and no. I would love to be, like these women who are in their 70s and are just like, I have no more, I I say all the things and I don't have a filter, and I'm like, I that looks great, but I'm not there. I don't know if I'll ever get to that point. Do I want to get to that point? So that's my long-winded answer, and I'm really curious what yours is.
That's really, I like that metaphor, that image of the kind of those spheres of closeness, and then filtering your degree of maybe honesty, vulnerability, self with that in mind. Because I was just thinking, there are relationships in my life where a disruption would be consequential. I mean, maybe it wouldn't threaten my
Yes.
security. Um, yeah, that's a really interesting question. The more I think about it, my first response was, I want, like you, I want to be courageous, and I want to be able to let the chips fall where they may. Meaning, I'm going to
Mm,
be me, and if not purposefully like combative, but I want to be the fullness of me. And if that's not okay, then I want to have the courage, which I didn't embody earlier, to let the chips fall where they may. Um, because I view myself as a good person, that the fullness of me should be
mm.
okay. And yet, as that practically plays out, meh, I kind of am in alignment with you. I think it depends.
Yeah. I maybe an important aspect of this is something that I've been working on with my therapist is letting other people be disappointed, because it really does activate that, "Ooh, I'm in trouble."
Mm-hmm.
And like, I don't want to be in trouble. I don't want to get punished. What's this feeling that I have to sneak
Yeah.
around? Why do I feel like I have to hide things? And can I tolerate someone, even in the inner circles, being disappointed? Can I just let them have their own feelings and not have to rush and try and fix or placate or, you know, that's really tricky for me.
Yeah, and remember earlier when I talked about the corrective emotional experience and how sometimes we try
Yeah.
to practice in a therapeutic setting where the therapist is pretty trained usually to provide that positive reinforcement, the positive corrective emotional experience. What also is important is being out in the world and practicing your new behaviors, whatever, being more, let's say, authentic or in alignment to who you are, and experiencing something that doesn't go as you had hoped, despite it's and letting that still be a corrective emotional experience,
Hmm.
because it doesn't fluster you in the same way, or because you are proud of yourself for being authentic despite the outcome. So the corrective emotional experience doesn't just have to be the perfect dream response. It can be
Hmm.
doing it anyway, and being proud of yourself for doing it.
I love that. Someone shared on Threads the other day. They were like, "Yeah, I want to start I think she was talking about wanting to start a podcast, but feeling really nervous and overwhelmed, and like, what if people don't like it?" And she said, like, how do you get over that? And I commented that, I've done 90 something episodes of this podcast, and every single time before I sit down to record, especially solo episodes, I procrastinate and put it off and feel anxious and nervous and then what am I going to say, and are people going to think I'm stupid and whatever, like, every single time. But I've gotten to the point now where I don't let that stop me,
Mm,
and I think that's like, to your point about this, the corrective emotional experience, it's this self repair
yes.
where it's like, I have, in many, many instances in my life, have allowed that feeling of nervousness or anxiousness or fear to, like, that was telling me what the truth was, that the feeling was an indication that I shouldn't do the thing. And now I just take that in stride, like, this, I make it mean something different. Now it means that, I'm doing something that's hard and I'm doing something that is scary. So why wouldn't I feel scared about it? That makes perfect sense.
Yes.
And then I step forward into the thing anyway.
Yes.
And it helps me be so much more brave in most every other area of my life.
I love what you just said. Um, that's it. And I had a therapist once, my own therapist, tell me, and I can't forget it: feel the fear and do it anyway. Feel the fear and do it anyway. And it was in regards to a hard thing that I needed to do. And I don't know, it stuck with me.
Mm. My fear always gets my fear gets stuck in my throat. And so it's like when I can feel that happening, I'm like, ooh, it helps me start to put on I almost said put on my microscope because I was thinking of the scientist
Yeah.
metaphor, but nobody puts a microscope on. So it makes me put my science cap
Yeah.
on and be like, what's happening here? And it kind of reminds me of when people play poker, and supposedly, because I, number one, have a terrible poker face, but also I don't know poker. I don't know how to play it. But people will say everybody has a tell. Everybody, you can tell when somebody's got
Mm-hmm.
a full house. Is a full
It
house
is. A
good?
full
I
house
don't know.
is very good.
They could. Okay. So you can tell when they have crap cards. And to me, it's like, can I get familiar with my own tells?
Yes.
Can I turn the lens around enough to look at myself and be like, oh, I know that when I feel that tightness in my throat, it's because there's something I want to say that I'm not saying.
Mm,
When I feel that lead weight in my stomach or in my pelvis, it means this. Can I get curious about what that means?
yes.
And that's such a fun, not always fun, but I think a much more playful way to engage with the bodily sensations than instead of sad cat, panicking about it and being like, my body's my enemy. Instead, it's like, how is this actually a really, really wise
Mm,
function that my body has that's telling me when a boundary is getting crossed, or telling me when there's something I need to speak up about, or telling me that my anger is actually a really healthy, normal response to this injustice. And can I say something about it? Can I do something about it?
yes. It's an invitation to philosophically almost change the way we view our body. So the discomfort,
Hmm.
instead of being an inconvenience or something to try to distance ourselves from, we are a beautiful tool that we can trust for our own as we navigate life. Our body's our best friend to help guide us and lead us. And if we listen and pay attention and familiarize ourselves with it, it can be such a beautiful companion instead of something to be distant
Mm,
from.
yes. Well, we haven't really dove into grief at all, but I know that's the next forthcoming, if I'm understanding this correctly, the forthcoming
Yeah.
next box that you're going to have available with the Pearl
Yeah.
Project. On our way out from this recording, can you tell us a little bit about that box?
Yeah. It comes out next week. And in full transparency, here we are. We're talking about being the fullness of ourselves. This is the kit I feel most excited about and most,
Mm.
I've probably poured the most. It just, it is my heartfelt passion project. Um, because I think because of those years spent face to face with people, this grief and loss kit isn't for those who have lost a loved one. That's an acute form of grief, but also for anyone for whom life has felt disappointing or hard, or there are elements of loss, be it through a child or health issues. We address and kind of come from an angle where we want to hold space for all of that, especially this holiday season.
Mm-hmm.
We explore in the beginning, we talk about this time I broke a bone and how the steps to healing when my bone was broken were so clear. We had this assessment and diagnosis and treatment plan and treatment, and it provided this roadmap for healing. And I was so aware for every broken bone, there are 100 broken hearts. And yet,
Mm-hmm.
we find ourselves in this place where there's not the same clarity around healing. I mean, where's our emergency room when it hurts so bad and we need relief? Where is our language that we use in our treatment plan? All of it feels so different, and we lack, I think, sometimes guidance and support when we most need it. Um, and so, kind of using that medical model, we think about pain as something we want to distance ourselves from. We want to fix it. It needs to be fixed. And in this kit, I offer a different metaphor for thinking about pain in terms of emotional pain and grief, which is less about a fixing and more about unfolding. And so the object is a blanket, and we talk about the power of companionship and comfort and gentleness and understanding. And we're trying to redefine how we think about grief and then provide some practical tools and resources as well.
That's beautiful. I got chills when you talked about where's the ER for broken hearts.
Mm-hmm.
I love that so much. Like what would happen if we had hospitals that had like emergency rooms for that? You know, because thinking about what are what do people do when they're in despair?
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, some really unhealthy things, or even, you know, life-ending things.
Correct.
So it makes perfect sense that, you know, addressing the whole person, body, heart, and soul, would be the thing that really helps us heal, truly.
Yeah. And how I think we want, because the medical model is so in our milieu, our cultural milieu, we tend to want to apply the principles when it comes to our emotional pain that we would a physical injury.
Hmm.
I mean, never have I more wanted a pain relief in the form of a prescription medication that took away my pain every 5 hours than when I was grieving. And yet we have to rethink how we're conceptualizing the emotional pain in a way that's countercultural.
I think we definitely need to have a part 2 of this podcast to talk about grief. Because, well, you know, that's like one of
Yes.
my passion projects is how to talk about and navigate grief in a way that is really illuminating and pulls back some of the taboos
Mm-hmm.
around talking about grief and loss, and having a really frank conversation about what the trajectory of healing and moving forward with loss looks like,
Yes.
instead of like getting over it.
Yeah. I
So yeah, part 2. But
love that.
I yeah, I'll put, of course, as usual, I'll put all the links to everything in the episode notes. Is there anything on the way out that you're like, oh, I gotta make sure I say this, or something that I haven't asked that you wanted to talk about?
I don't think so. If I think of something, I'll bring it up for part 2. I honestly, here's what I
Excellent.
want to say. I want to say thank you to you because you have helped me face my fear of showing up in these settings, and I am
Hmm.
practicing bringing all parts of myself. I happen to love communication, but I was so scared to show up here, and I'm glad I did. And you were the perfect host for this first step for me into this world of podcast.
I'm so glad, Jen. I'm so glad you. It was such a delight to talk with you, and you have so much wisdom, so much professional and personal lived experience, that it just felt like a shame not to allow other people to get a little taste of all the beautiful things that you have to share. So I'm so grateful that you
I did.
persevered through
I did.
your fear,
I
and
did.
you showed
I
up
am
here,
good.
and it
I am good.
I am worthy. And I mean, it pretty much went off without a hitch. So this has just been a real delight. You can find links to the boxes that Jen makes available through the Pearl Project. The links in the show notes. Alrighty. So for all my listeners, before we go, P.S. We expire.